Welcome to session 27 of the Simple course. In the first part of the session today, we will continue our discussion of the interpersonal effectiveness module of DBT, presented in the skills training workbook. In the second part, we'll talk about internal family systems parts that dominate our states of activation. In session 24, we introduced internal family systems. We saw how each part is in a particular state of physiological activation, which, as you will remember, may be fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. When a particular part is dominant in a person, that person might find themselves much of the time in one of these four states of activation. In Wise Mind Remediation, we looked at an approach for working with internal family systems parts. Today, we continue looking at how to work with those parts. We have also talked about the 3 stages of trauma therapy. Those 3 stages rest on 4 pillars of recovery from trauma, which we will also look at today. We'll end the session by presenting yet another case study that illustrates how to use several of the skills, tools, and strategies. To watch the introductory video entitled Fight, Flight, Freeze, and Fawn, please go to the website itsimple2021.com. Next are our usual reminders directed mostly at people doing the course in a group setting. Please take a few moments to read these on your own. To watch this week's mindfulness practice video entitled Gratitude Meditation, please go to the website now. For people doing the YouTube course as part of a group, you can now pause for questions, comments, or feedback. This is what we will do today. We will start by reviewing the last part of the skills training workbook, pages 244 to 258. Then we will discuss Simple Manual, session 27, the activation states of part selves. We'll pause for a break, and we will have time for discussion. We will end by practicing all the tools. We can use Jennifer's example from the Simple Manual, or preferably practice with a volunteer. Please let us know if you want to work with us. Please rate your homework now. To watch a video on interpersonal skills, please go to the website now. Today, in our review of the skills training workbook's advanced interpersonal effectiveness skills, we'll cover 6 topics. 1, coping with resistance and conflict. 2, how to negotiate. 3, how to analyze problem interactions. 4, exposure-based cognitive rehearsal. 5, the problem of state-dependent learning. And 6, the practice effect. 1, coping with resistance and conflict, page 244 of the workbook. If you have used the assertiveness skills previously discussed in the workbook and find that someone still isn't listening to you, try one or more of the following conflict management skills. A, mutual validation. They may not be listening to you because they do not feel heard. Acknowledge and appreciate their experience. Express that you understand where they are coming from. B, broken record. Distill what you want into one sentence. Keep confidently repeating the statement as many times as is necessary. C, probing. Ask them what it is about what you've said that bothers them. D, clouding. Agree with part of what they said without accepting everything. E, assertive delay. Tell them you need time to think before continuing the conversation. The workbook offers examples of each of these techniques. 2, how to negotiate, page 246 of the workbook. In a negotiation, assume that each party has valid needs. Use the Raven guidelines to keep you on track. R, relax. Accept conflict calmly. A, avoid. Avoid the aversive, stay positive. V, validate. Validate the other person's needs and concerns. E, examine. Examine your values. N, neutral. Use a neutral voice. 3, how to analyze problem interactions. Page 248 of the workbook. Figure out how the communication went wrong using the communication effectiveness checklist on pages 249 to 251 of the workbook. Use the checklist provided to analyze the interaction. 1, were you clear about your goals? 2, did you use aversive strategies? 3, did you use passive strategies? 4, what were the blocking factors? 5, what was the intensity level? 6, were there assertiveness problems? 7, were there blocks to listening? 8, did you forget the conflict management strategies? And 9, was there a negotiation breakdown? 4, exposure-based cognitive rehearsal, page 253 of the workbook. The following workbook sections show us how to rehearse the skills we have already learned when we are emotionally activated. 5, the problem of state-dependent learning, page 253 of the workbook. You most easily recall information when you are in the same emotional or physical state as you were when you initially learned that information. To help you overcome this problem and prepare you to cope when you're in an emotional state, you need to learn exposure-based cognitive rehearsal. This will give you a chance to practice your new skills while feeling the same emotions for which you'll need the coping strategies and techniques. 6, exposure-based cognitive rehearsal, practicing your coping skills, page 254 of the workbook. This is the workbook's version of the editing, splicing, pasting technique. 1, visualize a difficult situation you have been in which you were activated. 2, choose one of the skills you've learned, such as radical acceptance, distraction, self-soothing, safe place visualization, opposite action, etc. Imagine yourself using this skill while in the situation. 3, splice the old situation and paste in the new imagined one using the skills. 4, make sure you stay in the window of tolerance while doing this. Pendulate. Go over the examples of how to do this on pages 255 and 256 of the workbook. 7, the practice effect, page 256 of the workbook. The more often you visualize the new edited, spliced, and paste scenario, the better you will become at using the DBT skills. Practice visualizing your new edited, spliced, and pasted scenarios with as many past situations in which you became activated as possible. In the second part of today's session, 1, we will quickly review internal family systems. 2, we will take a closer look at features of parts in fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. 3, we will discuss the 4 pillars of trauma therapy. 4, we will end by going over a case study featuring Jennifer, which you can find on page 300 of the Simple Manual. What are some of the key points for us to remember about internal family systems? There are a few key points to remember about internal family systems. Internal family systems exiles are traumatic dissociated complexes. Many exiles are formed in early life due to developmental and attachment trauma, but exiles can be formed at whatever age trauma occurs. Protectors, both managers and firefighters, are emotional parts whose mission is to keep the exiles from surfacing into awareness with their accompanying pain, and to help a person survive by maintaining their attachments. The developmental maturational model of attachment and adaptation, attachment styles, are protectors. Part of wise mind remediation involves becoming intimate with our internal family systems part selves. What do they look like, feel, think? How do they behave? What is the typical state of activation? And what is their origin story? Today, sometimes a person finds themselves most of the time in one of the states of activation, be it fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. This suggests that one or more of their internal family systems parts is in that state of activation and dominates the self system. For example, someone who is chronically depressed may have one or more dominant parts that are in freeze. Chronically anxious people, dominant flight parts. Chronically angry, dominant fight parts. Chronically appeasing or people-pleasing, dominant fawn parts. Not every part of the internal family system is dominant. Remember that exiles arise from unprocessed traumatic emotional experiences, and that protectors, which can be managers or firefighters, arise to keep the exile's pain from surfacing into awareness and also to preserve attachment. At this point, it would be helpful for us to know how to find our parts and to have identified some of them. Finding part selves. To review. To find your part selves, start with a regular chain analysis. Consider if your feelings are those of a part self. What thoughts and behaviors go with those feelings? Use the internal family system's playing card deck to review common part selves. Consider the different developmental maturation model attachment adaptations. Review session 24, material on commonly occurring parts. Can you elaborate on how the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn states of activation relate to internal family systems parts and why this is important for us? Sometimes a person's personality is dominated by a particular state of activation, which could be fight, in which case that person finds themselves often becoming angry, flight, in which the person experiences a lot of anxiety, fawn, in which the person finds themselves trying to appease others, or freeze, in which the person is often depressed or dissociated. Understanding that there can be internal family systems part selves that dominate the personality helps us understand why people find themselves chronically in these different states of activation. It also tells us that we may have to pay particular attention to those dominant parts as we embark in the process of healing. Dominant part selves and states of activation. At some point in their lives, everyone experiences the calm, alert, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn states of physiological activation or arousal. If the rational, mature adult part is dominant in us, we likely spend the majority of our lives in a calm, alert state. Many people who have emotional dysregulation spend a lot of time in flight, freeze, or fawn, which are all outside the window of tolerance. They keep falling into these activation holes or maybe chronically in those holes. People with emotional dysregulation may also spend considerable time in mature adult, calm, alert, but when their fight, flight, freeze, or fawn are activated, the activation may be so intense that it causes a lot of difficulties. The state of activation a person experiences most frequently is indicative of their dominant part selves. Each part self is predominantly in one state of activation. Wise mind remediation involves identifying your internal family systems part selves. We have previously discussed ways of identifying your part selves. Today, we'll consider the states of activation you most frequently experience, which can help you identify your dominant, most problematic part selves. As you consider the states of activation you most frequently find yourself in, calm, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, and become more familiar with your internal family prominent parts, keep the following in mind. Calm and alert are arousal states in the window of tolerance. Fight and flight are hyper-aroused states, so that people in these states feel angry, irritated, annoyed, fearful, anxious, panicky, and uncertain a lot of the time. Freeze and fawn are hypoarousal states, so that people in these states feel depressed, sad, numb, stuck, ashamed, unworthy, and empty a lot of the time. People in fight have dominant outer critic parts. People in fawn and flight have dominant inner critic parts. People in flight run away and avoid. Those in fight and fawn run towards. Those in freeze go nowhere. Fight and flight are active. Fawn and freeze are passive. If parts in a particular state of activation are dominant in a person, how does that affect their personality? Trauma can give rise to the 4F personality types. The 4Fs are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. A person with unresolved trauma may experience any of these states of activation occasionally or frequently. These states become part of their personality. The 4F trauma personality types lie on two axes, depicted in this slide by the vertical and horizontal arrows. The horizontal arrow has to do with seeking avoidance instincts. Seeking implies action, whereas avoidance implies inaction. Fight and flight are about action. Freeze and fawn are about inaction. The vertical arrow has to do with the attachment instinct, which is about approach and connection. Fawn and fight seek to connect. Freeze and flight disconnect or withdraw. When fight parts are dominant in a person's internal family systems, the person may be irritable, angry, aggressive, and attacking. Healthy and adaptive fight that does not dominate the self system consists of being assertive, having good boundaries, being courageous, determined, and assuming leadership. Unhealthy fight, which is controlling the exile, is seen in bullies and people who are explosive, controlling, or entitled. Core beliefs of fight parts include power and control can create safety, assuage abandonment, and secure love. People with prominent fight parts tend to control conversations, be critical of others, and be explosive. Those parts pursue power and control. They connect with others by controlling them. They demand perfection, are impulsive, and avoid isolation. They may have arisen in families in which children are given insufficient limits and learn to imitate narcissistic parents. Fight parts may exert different degrees of control over the internal family system. They may be present for only short periods of time or most of the time. People with significant fight parts may be diagnosed as narcissistic or sociopathic. When flight parts dominate, flight parts are anxious, fearful, and panicky. They avoid, can be perfectionistic, and worry constantly. Healthy flight that does not dominate the self system is healthy retreat and disengagement, which often has components of perseverance and industriousness. Unhealthy flight, which is controlling and exile, involves constant panicking and worrying, mindless and frantic activity, busyness, micromanagement, and obsessive compulsive thoughts and behaviors. Core beliefs of perfectionists and workaholic parts include perfection achievement will make me safe and lovable. Flight parts pursue safety by escaping into obsessive thought and compulsive actions. They withdraw from connections and stay focused on personal performance. They are over-analytical and avoid inaction. Children and adolescents with significant flight parts range from the driven A student to the ADHD dropout. People with significant flight parts may overworry, be anxious about their performance, and overachieve, and are frequently diagnosed with mood disorders, obsessive compulsive disorder, or ADHD. When fawn parts dominate, fawn parts avoid conflicts at all costs. They prioritize other people's needs, people please, and have a hard time setting boundaries and saying no. Healthy fawning that does not dominate the self system involves loving and being a service to others, compromising, listening, and being agreeable. Unhealthy fawning, which is controlling and exile, consists of acquiescing to others by being servile, obsequious, and seeking to keep others happy, connecting with them by merging and deferring to them. To avoid conflict, they demand social perfection of themselves. Core beliefs of fawning parts include the price of admission to any relationship is the forfeiture of all my needs, rights, preferences, and boundaries. People with significant fawning parts are often children of narcissistic parents. They learned that some safety and love can be earned by being a compliant servant of the parents. People with significant fawn parts can be entertainers, nice guys, yes men or women, overly concerned with flattering others and fitting in. They are often labeled as codependent or parentified children. When freeze parts dominate, freeze parts escape by dissociating. They space out, become immobile or depressed. Healthy freeze that does not dominate the self system involves living in the moment and mild dissociation from everyday life events and states of mindfulness, presence, or detachment. Unhealthy freeze involves contracting, hiding, camouflaging, isolating, withdrawing, or being a hermit. Core beliefs of freeze parts include people are synonymous with danger. Freeze parts pursue safety by avoiding human contact or withdrawing from others. People with prominent freeze parts tend to have grown up in the most dysfunctional families in which they were scapegoated, abandoned, not allowed to employ fight, flight, or fawn responses. For these people, establishing a therapeutic alliance with a therapist may be challenging. Relational healing with partners, friends, or pets can be very helpful. People with significant freeze parts hide from the world. They hibernate, sleep a lot, daydream, watch TV, or play video games. They are often diagnosed with depression, dissociative identity disorder, ADD, or schizophrenia. For people with prominent fight parts, recovery involves understanding the cost of their behavior and redirecting their anger towards childhood circumstances which must be grieved. They need to become mindful of the needs, rights, and feelings of others, and to see them from wise mind, rather from the perspective of their harsh outer critic. For people with prominent flight parts, recovery involves understanding the cost of their perfectionism or compulsive behavior and redirecting their thinking towards childhood losses they are grieving through their incessant activity. They must become mindful of their constant physical and psychological activity and learn to relax and decrease it. They also need to appease their inner critical parts that demand perfection. Recovery for people with prominent fawn parts involves understanding the cost of forfeiting boundaries, rights, and needs. They need to grieve the stifling of individuality during their childhood and redirect people pleasing towards self compassion. They need to appease their inner critic, which stops them from being assertive, and to accept disapproval. Recovery in people with significant freeze parts involves understanding the cost of isolation and redirecting social anxiety towards self compassion. They need to grieve the childhood helplessness and learn coping skills for dissociation. When we discussed structural dissociation theory, we talked about 3 stages of trauma therapy: stabilization, processing trauma, and resuming paused psychosocial growth. How are the 4 pillars of trauma recovery different from those 3 stages? Pillars of trauma recovery. In session 22, we discussed the 3 stages of trauma therapy. Stage 1, education, stabilization, and safety. Stage 2, processing the trauma. Stage 3, reconnecting, finding meaning, and developing to your full potential. These stages describe the sequence of issues trauma therapy prioritizes, focuses on, and addresses. You can't work on stage 2 processing before having successfully mastered stage 1 stabilization work. The pillars of trauma recovery are components of trauma work that are used in all 3 stages and are critical for healing and recovery. Today, we briefly review the pillars of trauma recovery and how they have been incorporated into Simple. This slide summarizes the 3 stages of trauma recovery, which we consider in session 22. We won't revisit these 3 stages today. Mainstream psychiatric and psychological approaches are often not helpful in people with attachment and trauma spectrum disorders who require specialized treatment approaches. Since the rediscovery of attachment and trauma disorders in the 1980s, there is an emerging consensus that their treatment rests on 4 pillars. The 4 pillars are 1, psychoeducation; 2, trauma-informed treatment approaches; 3, physical movement, breathing, and meditation practices; and 4, human connection and relational healing. Let's look at these 4 pillars one at a time and consider how they are incorporated into the Simple course. Pillar 1, psychoeducation and mindfulness. Psychoeducation involves helping people understand how the mind works and how it is affected by trauma. Simple offers an overview of the theory in the fields of attachment and trauma. There are many excellent books available on these subjects, including Bessel van de Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score, and Peter Walker's Complex PTSD, From Surviving to Thriving. Psychoeducation is important in all 3 stages of trauma therapy. It involves 1, psychoeducation includes developing a model of the mind by which to understand ourselves. In Simple, we do this by presenting a psychodynamic attachment model. 2, mindfulness. Being mindful of ourselves, which is also known as mentalizing, involves seeing ourselves, including our body sensations, feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. In simple, we do this by using crisis plans, diary cards, chain analysis, many of the skills, the personal dashboard, and the edit, splice, and paste technique. Pillar 2, trauma-informed treatment approaches. With the increasing awareness of attachment and trauma spectrum disorders, approaches that specifically target their treatment are being developed. These include EMDR, somatic experiencing, sensory motor psychotherapy, the comprehensive resource model, internal family systems therapy, and tension, stress, and trauma release. Trauma-informed treatment approaches are important in all three stages of trauma therapy. The stage 1 trauma-informed treatment approach, simple uses, is dialectical behavioral therapy. The stage 2 trauma-informed treatment approach, simple focuses on our internal family systems and wise mind remediation, which is inspired by Daniel P. Brown's ideal parent protocol. The stage 3 trauma-informed treatment approach, simple focuses on, is the goals diary card procedure and the wellness assessment tool. Simple recognizes and promotes the need for trauma-informed approaches in all aspects of physical and mental health care. Pillar number 3, physical movement, breathing, and meditation practices. There's a growing awareness that implicit traumatic memories are rooted in the body. Research is finding that the most effective healing approaches for attachment and trauma spectrum disorders focus on breathing, physical movement, and meditation. Practices that have been found helpful in addressing the somatic components of trauma include yoga, Feldenkrais, Tai Chi, Qigong, and martial arts such as Taekwondo. Physical movement, breathing, and meditation practices are important in all three stages of trauma therapy. Simple introduces participants to meditation practices. We also encourage the use of physical movement and breathing techniques, which can be structured using the goals diary card procedure. Pillar number 4, human connection and healing through relationships. People with attachment and trauma spectrum disorders often compulsively repeat unhealthy relationship patterns. Experiencing healthy ones, especially with intimate partners, can be a very healing experience. Human connection and relational healing is important in all three stages of trauma therapy. Trauma and attachment issues can make relationships challenging. Through repetition compulsion, we may fall into the same attachment pattern holes in our relationships. This includes relationships with other simple group members and co-leaders. Groups can trigger us into emotional mind. The silver lining of being triggered into a state of activation in the group is that we can use our tools and skills to get out of emotional mind and repair relationship breaches. If at this point you're still attending the group, you've likely had some experience with this. Doing this work in the simple group helps us to learn to do it in other real-life settings. The simple course tries to foster a wise mind atmosphere of secure attachment and trust between participants and co-leaders. We may at times disagree on things, content, but we always try to disagree agreeably. Process. We hope the group has provided everyone with some experiences of healthy, secure interactions. Now that we have covered all the 6 simple tools, can you give us an example of someone using all of them in their lives? Let's look at what Jennifer did in her therapy. Jennifer was a 45-year-old, married, stay-at-home mom of 4 children who ranged in ages from 8 to 17. Her husband, Robert, worked as a software engineer while also running their 150-acre cash crop farm. After the birth of her oldest child, Jennifer developed severe depression. It recurred following the birth of each of her other children. A few months after her first 2 episodes of depression, Jennifer felt that she was back to her normal. But after the 3rd episode, her mood never completely recovered. When she was severely depressed, Jennifer had suicidal thoughts. She had been hospitalized twice and had tried several antidepressants, along with other medications, to make them work better. She wondered if the medications she was on now were helping at all. Jennifer had been adopted when she was 6 months old. From birth and until her adoption, she had lived with a foster family. Her biological mother was 18 years old when Jennifer was born. Apart from some basic health information, she had never been able to learn much about her biological mother's life and circumstances. Jennifer was adopted by John and Elizabeth, both university professors, when they were in their late 30s. They had tried unsuccessfully to have children. Elizabeth was ambitious and brilliant. She was a tenured professor who had written 2 acclaimed books. John was quietly supportive of his wife. He was a competent academic, but was shy and preferred cooking and reading to socializing. When Jennifer was 2 years old, to everyone's surprise, Elizabeth got pregnant and Jason was born. Jason and Jennifer were opposites. She had blonde hair, blue eyes, and fair skin. He had olive skin, black hair, and brown eyes, just like Elizabeth. Jennifer, as a child and teenager, was shy and slightly overweight. She did well enough in school and was a conscientious student, but lived in the shadow of her younger brother, who effortlessly excelled both at sports and academics. Jennifer remembered family functions at which everyone would delight in Elizabeth's and Jason's latest accomplishments, and as an afterthought, politely inquired about what Jennifer and John were doing. Elizabeth was constantly trying to help Jennifer, getting her tutors, sending her to weight loss summer camps, and insisting that she accompany her to the gym. Jason became a lawyer and worked for the government in human rights. Jennifer went to agricultural college, where she met and fell in love with Robert. He had studied there for a year before going into computer engineering. The apparently normal part of Jennifer was quite content with her life. Robert was kind, supportive, and an amazing father and husband. The family was financially secure, and the kids were thriving. Jennifer, however, also had emotional parts that played a significant role in her ongoing psychological distress. When Jennifer started doing Holds diary cards, she used feeling bad as her target. One of the first chain analyses she did involved a family get-together. It was Thanksgiving. Jennifer was in the habit of hosting most of the family's events. She lived in a large country home next to 20 acres of bush, which the kids loved to explore. As usual, Elizabeth and Jason dominated the conversation. Meanwhile, Jennifer was feeling tense, hurt, inadequate, anxious, annoyed, and ashamed, but masterfully hiding it behind a smile. A multitude of thoughts accompanied these emotions. Elizabeth loved and appreciated Jason more and was disappointed in her. Jennifer wondered if Elizabeth regretted having adopted her. Having these thoughts made her feel ungrateful, ashamed, and selfish. She had a great family. How could she resent her mother and brother? Jennifer had felt hurt and annoyed during the get-together. The feelings of inadequacy, anxiety, and shame had come later. Jennifer had started thinking about her mental health problems and worrying that she might slip back into depression. Over the next few days, she became more anxious and her sleep was disrupted. She wanted to escape this pain and began to withdraw from her usual activities and spend more time in bed. Using what she had learned from this incident, Jennifer replaced the beginner target feeling bad with the intermediate targets feeling inadequate, ashamed, and irritated. She also used ruminating, withdrawing, and suicidal thinking. Later in therapy, Jennifer identified several internal family parts, which became her advanced targets. The grieving child. This exile held the implicit memories of being abandoned by her biological mother. Its activation was freeze. It was pre-verbal. Jennifer had no explicit memories for any events from this time in her life. This part was burdened with feelings of abandonment, terrifying aloneness, and a sense of impending death. This is what she felt at the worst of her depression. This exile was an hypofreeze of impending death. The inadequate child. This exile held the memories of growing up in the shadow of her brother and mother. Compared to an average person, Jennifer did well. But compared to Jason and Elizabeth, she was a failure. Elizabeth's trying to help her had inadvertently reinforced young Jennifer's perception that there was something wrong with her. This part felt hurt, inadequate, and ashamed. It wanted to hide. This exile was also in freeze. The inner critic. This manager represented Jennifer's internal working model of how the world saw her. well-intentioned but inadequate, not smart enough, not meeting expectations. This critic was constantly interpreting everything Jennifer did in a negative light. The inner critic manifested it in Jennifer's rumination. She identified the critic's automatic negative thoughts, which included, you are stupid, you're not good enough, you cannot do anything right, and you must hide what you're feeling or others will know that you're an awful person. The critic was in fight, its anger being mostly directed at Jennifer's exiles. The people pleaser. This manager attempted to compensate for Jennifer's perceived inadequacy by focusing on other people's needs, getting along with them, and not setting healthy boundaries. The people pleaser wasn't fun. Jennifer was always doing nice things for her family, including hosting all the get togethers. The angry teenager. This manager and aspiring firefighter was related to Jennifer's abandonment by her biological mother, but also to her feeling growing up that she would never be good enough. Although Jennifer was conscientious and studious, she had experimented with marijuana and dressed and painted her fingernails black. She was angry at the world for the pain it caused her. This angry part was, however, too intimidated by her inner critic to ever seriously act out. The despair part. This firefighter was related to Jennifer's abandonment by her biological mother, but also the feeling growing up that she had never been good enough. Jennifer had never felt the well-being that people with secure attachment do. After many years of struggle, this part had given up of ever feeling well. It wanted to give up and longed for the pain to be over. It dissociated and felt empty and numb. Jennifer worked on a crisis plan for when the despair part was activated, when she found herself spiraling into the hole of depression. If she noticed that she was falling into that hole, she spent time in the barn with her horse, taking care of her, talking to her, and mucking her stall, and felt better. She also started using rational mind remediation and the goals diary card. After 18 months of working with the simple tools, skills, and strategies, Jennifer had gotten better at staying in the window of tolerance. She felt ready to do stage 2 post-traumatic work using wise mind remediation. Jennifer's wise mind remediation. Jennifer worked at getting to know her part selves. She associated each part with a visual image. She also started doing wise mind chain analysis, becoming increasingly aware of the role each part played in the situation in which she had become activated. She fostered wise mind. Jennifer loved the work of a local Native North American female visual artist who painted tall, slim, long-robed, ethereal Native women, lovingly holding babies, or under a canopy of stars, or connecting with the natural world. She imagined this woman embodying the qualities of wise mind. As these images became more vivid in her imagination, Jennifer began to call her Mother Earth and think of her as a guardian angel. Jennifer then used the edit, splice, and paste technique to work on her memory of one of the family get-togethers that had triggered in her the usual patterns of feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. She imagined the situation, but instead of Jennifer, she pictured all of her part selves with all of their different feelings, thoughts, and behaviors experiencing the situation. Over a period of several weeks, Jennifer worked with this single incident and imagined the parts enveloped in the robes of her guardian angel as they attended the family get-together. She would often pause the video so that the guardian angel and her parts could have interchanges. Sometimes these consisted of guardian angel hugging an exile. Other times, there were conversations such as the one that took place with Jennifer's inner critic. Guardian angel: I'm glad to be able to talk like this, thank you. Critic: fine, but don't get your hopes up. Guardian angel: I know it was hard for you to let me get to know you since you don't trust me. My hope is that with time you'll learn to, because I want the best for all of us. Critic: is this going to take long? I have things to do. Guardian angel: it'll take whatever time you're willing to stay. Critic: well, I might leave soon. What did you want to talk to me about? Guardian angel: your feelings and your thoughts when we got together with Elizabeth. Critic, you know my thoughts. It's clear you're a disappointment. Just accept and suck it up. Because if people knew your feelings and your thoughts, they would totally reject you. Guardian angel, I know that's what you think, and I understand why. You are trying to be helpful. Use tough love to make me try harder so that I won't be rejected. Thanks to you, I also developed a people pleaser part, which felt that if I did enough for others, I would be accepted. Critic, I think you got that right. Guardian angel, I'm very grateful to you. You've had a hard job, and you've always been there for me. You've motivated me to try harder. Critic, I didn't think you would understand. Guardian angel, I do understand you and all the other parts. Critic, other parts? Guardian angel, yes, you are trying to protect our hurt child. There's also a people pleaser, a grieving part, and a despair part. Critic, and we all survived. Guardian angel, we have survived, but we haven't thrived. The balance that we developed was necessary given the circumstances in which we grew up. But things are different now. I think we could all be happier if you allowed a few small changes. Critic, I knew there was a catch. I'm not sure when to continue this conversation. I knew you wanted to get rid of me. Guardian angel, I don't want to upset you, and I don't want to get rid of you. I want to take care of you so that you can have some peace and quiet. As the guardian angel carries on with this dialogue, she is monitoring Jennifer's activation and making sure she stays in the window of tolerance. Guardian angel, as a child, I felt inadequate, alone, sad, and ashamed. There were many reasons for this. Now I have a great life with my husband and kids, but I'm still haunted by my past. I'm working on healing from trauma from my childhood so that we can all feel better. What I would like to do is earn your trust so that eventually you'll allow me to handle the situations that now trigger us, especially those involving Elizabeth. Critic, I don't trust anybody but myself. I'm afraid that if I don't do my job, we will be completely rejected and abandoned, just like we were by our birth mother. Guardian angel, I know it'll take time, but I'm committed to continuing this dialogue with you and with all the other parts. Jennifer's wise mind continued these conversations with her part selves. As she was doing this work, Jennifer attended a workshop on trauma, which suggested that she look into her own eyes on a mirror as she was talking to her parts. She found this quite helpful. The parts got to know wise mind Jennifer. Eventually, Jennifer felt ready to put this imaginal work into practice. That year, Jennifer was, as usual, hosting the Christmas family party. She decided she would outdo herself and allow her people pleaser free rein in the preparations. She was also carefully preparing an assertiveness script for an imagined conversation she knew she would have to have with Elizabeth. As, in her imagination, she rehearsed this conversation, her parts would jump in with their feelings and thoughts, but wise mind reassured them and remained in the lead. At the Christmas party, everyone was enjoying themselves and lavishing praise on Jennifer for all that she had done. Elizabeth arrived late and made the rounds, talking to various family members. At the end of the evening, as the get-together wound down, Elizabeth came to sit on the couch by Jennifer. The first thing Elizabeth said to Jennifer, apart from hello at the beginning of the evening, was, "Why didn't you invite Aunt Judy this year?" Jennifer, despite all her preparations, was still, for a moment, taken aback. She felt her parts becoming activated and wanting to take over. But she had rehearsed for this. Her wise mind reassured her parts, telling them that she would handle this, and launched into the rational mind assertiveness script that she had worked on. Rational and wise mind Jennifer. Mom, I put a lot of work into preparing this family get-together. I just wanted everyone to enjoy themselves. There are many reasons why I didn't invite Aunt Judy this year, but I don't want to get into that. Did you notice how that was the first thing you said to me all evening? I love you, and I've always wanted your approval. I've done a lot of work on myself, and I've realized that there is a part of me that feels inadequate. Even as an adult, I continue to look to you for approval so that I feel worthwhile. I know now that I am worthwhile. I want to build a relationship with you in which I no longer am the child who needs your approval. I know this is a lot for you to take in. You've been such a great mom. You're an amazing person, and I really respect you so much. I'm so grateful for all you've done for me and for all your love. I hope at some point in the future, after you've thought through this, we can continue this conversation. Jennifer kissed her speechless mom and left to say goodbye to the other guests. For a few days after that, Jennifer resisted the temptation to call Elizabeth and apologize. Then she received a call from Elizabeth, who said that she had been thinking about their conversation. It had been painful, but she thought Jennifer was right, and she was proud of her. She said she had never meant to hurt her, but realized that she had. She really wanted to continue the conversation. Before she could repair her relationship with Elizabeth, Jennifer first had to harmonize her and her family. After this, mother and daughter had many more conversations in which, for the first time, they really saw each other. Unfortunately, things don't always turn out as well as they did for Jennifer and her mom. Jennifer's mental health improved, as did her relationships. Not everyone is ready to look at themselves and change as Elizabeth was. Jennifer was glad for how it turned out. But even if Elizabeth had not been so open, she still would have said what she said to her and would have grown as a result. On the PowerPoint presentation that you will find on the website, there is a review and practice component that covers the tools, techniques, and strategies that we have previously covered in the simple course. Looking over those slides will help you to consolidate the material. Let's look at the homework for this session. Thank you for spending this time with me, and see you next session.